Just before we get started, a quick note about structure. We feel that these types of panels work best when there's interaction with the audience. So I at times will try to bring you into the conversation, and if you have a question that arises after one of the speakers addresses a question, Krista Kukuk will has a mic and will be roving about with it and kind of give a signal, and she'll come up, and we'd very much like to hear your questions. We're going to start with a question which I think is on many people's minds, which has to do with the growth of the discussion around mental health. And I think many of us are curious to know, are mental health issues more prevalent today than they were in the past? Maybe Karen,
It's interesting as a grief counselor, and grief comes from many different forms: the loss of divorce, moves, death, end of relationships in teens' life. And in the last 15 years, I've found teens are more open to speaking about things in their life, especially males, boys. And I found that very interesting in the last 15 years to see that conversation happening. And they are concerned about their friends, and they're concerned about their relationships so I feel that it's more prevalent because of media, social media. It's more prevalent because of a scientific study and theoretical newcomings of how our brain works and how it affects us, mental illness, how it affects us. I find that, yes, I think that just in natural progression of our society, that yes, it has increased the discussion.
I would just add to that, the anecdotal evidence, and I think it's largely anecdotal at this stage, is that it is increasing. There's no really good old baselines, but what I can tell you for a fact is it's massive. The amount of struggle that's going on out there is massive. This is the number one, by far, health-related risk your young people will face. And I'm not talking about suicide here, I'm talking about mental health challenges altogether. And people are starting to talk about it, that's the good news, but that does mean that the lineups are getting longer. And there is very good evidence from surveys being done across post-secondary institutions that the lineups are getting longer, the wait times are being affected. So there's this tsunami coming, I think. So I think that's why it's important for parents and families and young people to be talking about this, because the earlier you talk about it, just like a physical health situation, the faster you can get on top of it and manage it, learn so many self-care things that will help a young person like my Jack probably deal with it and have a long and happy, healthy life, if we're talking about it.
Given what Karen and Eric have just told us, I wonder if it would be maybe worthwhile to explore for a few minutes what are some of the most common struggles that our adolescents experience when it comes to mental health.
We've become a culture that is very uncomfortable with uncertainty, and we love to label everything that we can. We love to label sadness as depression, and we love to label panic as anxiety, and we pick up on that. And in terms of the most common struggles, it's the common struggles that everybody deals with. It's loneliness, it's sadness, it's anger, it's frustration, it's not being able to control the things that you want to control, it's just feeling overwhelmed and powerless a lot of the time. Not being able to make your own decisions, especially as an adolescent. You can fall into the shadow of older siblings or into parents or cousins or other peers that seem to be excelling above you, and it's very, very easy to feel small. And I think that feeling small is what leads to a lot of these issues.
I wonder if, given what you've said, Matthew, I think it's hard probably for many parents to discern, what is typical adolescent behavior of sadness and anxiety, and what crosses the line into a more serious situation. I think that's and you addressed this in part during your wonderful presentation today. I wonder if we could talk for a while about that.
Like I mentioned previously, mental health issues and mental illness did run in my family. So it seemed as if, if I was struggling, that it'd be really easy for my mom to recognize what was going on and act on it. But that was definitely not the case. Even when my mom, I was acting out quite a bit and getting into really big fights with my mom, threatening to run away, things like that. But on the outside, everything was still very normal. Like, my grades were still very good. I was very involved in school and had a lot of social life. So when my mom didn't know what to do and she looked to professionals and explained, she's fighting with me, but everything outside in her school environment, social environment still seems good. They told her it was just normal teenage angst, but it really wasn't, especially now in comparison to my sister, who's the same age but was guarded from a lot of the trauma that I was exposed to. She goes through normal teenage angst. What I was going through definitely wasn't. And I think the best way to distinguish, it's hard to be like, this symptom is teenage angst and this symptom is mental illness. You're just putting labels. It's just getting complicated. One big thing is, trust your gut. Parents' intuition, even I'm obviously not a parent, but I know when I've taken on a bit of a parental role for my younger sister, and I can tell when she's struggling and when it's more than just a teenage angst problem. But more so than anything, start the conversation and ask your kids from a genuine, serious place. My mom would ask me if I was depressed, but it was almost like this is probably not the situation, but I'm just gonna ask anyway place. And that was really hard for me because I wasn't taking my illness seriously because I didn't understand what was going on and I was so ashamed of it. So to hear her ask me about it in a way that was perpetuating the shame and not really addressing it full on, didn't make it accessible for me to be like, yeah, I need help. If she had sat me down and said, Britney, are you struggling? And asking really the tough questions, asking me, are you thinking of taking your own life? Are you struggling with depression? Are you feeling anxious? It really would have opened up a whole new conversation and helped me as an adolescent, as a young person, get to a much healthier place than I really was. So ultimately, the best way to distinguish whether it's something that is temporary or something that could really lead to permanent mental health issues is just starting the conversation and asking the direct questions straight from the source.
And I'll jump off from the trusting your gut point, that you know your children best, you know what their sort of patterns of behavior are. If there is some kind of change in behavior that's different from what you're used to, that is lasting a long time, so it's not just a day or a week, but it's turning into weeks or it's turning into months. It's something that's lasting a long time, and it's really getting in the way of their life, so they're no longer able to do the things that they would normally do. Maybe they are withdrawing from a lot of the different activities that they're involved in, and also how intense it seems. So I would think of those three things. How long is it going on? How much is it getting in the way of their life? And how intense are the feelings and behaviors that you're witnessing?
Karen?
No, I think that is exactly using very well. That's what I hear.
Trinity, can you speak to how you've observed some of your peers' behavior? What do you see in terms of change of behavior?
Yeah, honestly, sometimes it is really hard to spot. Sometimes it's the people you would have never guessed. But I guess as a parent, you, like they've all said, you know your kid better than anyone. And if you can see those behavioral changes, maybe they're just not, even things simple as not laughing as much as the things they're used to, or not being as passionate, not being as involved, not finding as much motivation to do things, backing out of certain situations. that's when you kind of have to start looking further into it. Another thing, though, that I think is really important is not only asking the direct questions, which I think are really important, but also saying beforehand, even before you see your kid is maybe struggling, that, hey, if you are going through something, if you are struggling with something, I want you to know that I'm here and I'm open and I'm going to listen and I'm not going to judge you, because sometimes kids often feel like they're getting in trouble when they're getting confronted about mental health, like it's something that's wrong with them, rather than from a compassionate place from the parent's perspective. So just being really open with your kids beforehand and during, of course, is going to make the process a whole lot easier, because your kid will know if they're going through something and they're going to want to open up to you about it. So you won't have to be playing guessing games. They'll just be a lot more willing to open up in the first place.
Excellent, well said. I wonder if now maybe we're moving into the domain of, you know, not only how to tell when kids are struggling, but how to engage in an open conversation. And for many parents, that's there's some fear there, and it's a difficult process to initiate. I wonder if there's some questions among the parents for the panelists on this topic. Krista?
Hi, I'm Laura, and I'm just curious what the panel thinks. If your child, as a parent, you do approach your child and you're trying to be open-minded, and you approach the question directly, and your child denies or says that no, they're fine, they're okay, everything's good. Do you leave it alone, or what do people think at that point?
It's a fine line between push and pull, right? And letting them know that you're there is an amazing first step. If they don't really invest, the biggest thing that you can do is support them in ways, in parts of their life that would help them be healthy in general. I really view mental health in a very holistic way. Eating right, sleeping well, exercising, getting back to the community, doing the things you love, having those invested relationships. Those are all the things that make the life really full. And focusing on the deficits or on what is going wrong really only gets you so far. So if they're pulling away, make them aware that the door is open, and encourage them to find health in other aspects of their life outside of in whatever they love.
I'd like to just add to that a little bit. When that happens, is acknowledge that. Say, well, it sounds like that I can see this change in you. You seem to be sad, or you seem to be angry, or whatever that feeling or whatever you see, is to acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge that it's maybe hard to open up and talk about it, but I just want you to be aware that I see this in you and I'm here for you. And then to model behaviors. Children, you are the best model for their mental health. And to be able to model that by exercising, seeing open conversations with other people in the family and your partner, healthy eating, and volunteering. Those type of things are very important for them to see, and that you engage in that as well.
These are gems of answers that you're getting here tonight. I love it. And I really like this analogy of mental health and physical health. They really, I'm on a mission to eliminate the word mental in the two-part thing that's mental health. It all just is health. And you really have to come to believe that. And that does mean taking care of, like Matt Matt says, your eating and your sleeping and your exercise. But if you're seeing a change in behavior, if you're seeing, and there are lists out there, you can find it on the CAMH site, what are the 10 signs of a child who's struggling from depression or might be suicidal? And it is irritability, it is weight gain, weight loss, it is addiction issues, it is lack of sleep or too much sleep. They're all there, they're easy to find. So if you're seeing those things, but the young person is playing back that everything's fine, you really can trust your gut that probably not everything is fine. It may not be mental illness, it may be a relationship issue. But if it's a prolonged thing, it needs to be addressed. And asking it once isn't enough. I asked my son once, literally once, do you ever feel depressed? It's not enough. He must have been depressed. Okay? It's not a normal behavior of someone who is healthy to be feeling suicidal, right? So you need to find the time over time, like Karen says, to model these behaviors and go deeper. And there's different techniques you can use with boys and girls, and modeling it yourself, talking about your failures as well as your successes. You know, you can map your family tree. Everybody knows who had cancer in the family, but how many people have actually done a family tree of mental health and talked about it at a Sunday night table? These are the sorts of things that over time build up this trust and sort of lower the barriers for that type of answer.
I wonder if, sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
I just have one more comment on that. Even though they don't let you in now, does not mean that they will never let you in. And I struggled for a long time, and I did not reach out to my family. And then I got to a point where they were the only people I could reach out to. And when I did that, they were the most supportive people that I could have asked for. And they became exactly who I cherish. So I'll quote, I think it's a German proverb, but it's, the past is water under the bridge, and we're blood, and blood is thicker than water. And I really like that because it's family. That's family. So
There's no doubt this is a crucial point. I wonder if we could explore it a bit more, maybe Britney or Aaron, if you wouldn't mind. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could maybe talk about what it was like being on the other end of the questions, the persistent questioning maybe from parents, and how you reacted to that initially, but then how you were able to then, you know, to establish that discourse with your family.
So I can answer that a little bit. Like I said, it was a very weird way that my mom approached the situation. I think she was really afraid that the answer to "Are you thinking of suicide?" would be yes, which it was, and she was so afraid of it that she didn't want to ask the question. So she would ask, like I said, she would ask if things were okay, but it wasn't in a direct way. And so due to that, since she wasn't fully accepting of the severity of mental illness and mental health, I wasn't fully accepting, and so I became very resistant to her questions. And on paper, for lack of better words, my life was really good, so it was easy to say, well, look at my grades, look at my friends, look at all these other things, clearly I'm just okay. I think one thing that's important to note is it's better to feel annoyed than alone. I would get annoyed with my mom's persistence because it wasn't coming from the right place. Like, she was obviously extremely genuinely concerned and really wanted to help, but it wasn't coming from the direct seriousness that I needed as a young person then. But I knew she was there, and I knew that if I really needed her attention, I knew how to get it and when to get it and how to get it, which was extremely important, as opposed to feeling that she was completely unapproachable. And even further, as she developed the right strategies to approach the conversation, and as I grew also and learned, my mom also struggles with mental illness, so it's kind of parallel. As she learned to kind of take care of her own mental health, she further learned how to address my mental health and my mental illness. Our conversations now about it are very, very different. And it's really such a journey. Like, if you feel as if you're not getting through to your kids now, like, just know that, you know, they hear you. They may not respond. I didn't respond, but they definitely hear you. And if you're anything like my journey, eventually it will be a more open and comfortable conversation, and you will one day discuss how proud you are of each other for coming to this place where you can discuss mental health and mental illness so freely and truly be there for each other. And now our goal is to expand this to the rest of my family, who's not nearly as open as we are, but it really is a journey.
We have a question up there, but I'd like you to have a chance to respond.
I was going to just add to the role modeling point before that. I think the reason it was so hard for me to reach out to my family or to talk what I was going through is because, when I grew up, no one in my family talked about their own mental health and their own struggles. I've since discovered that pretty much everyone in my family struggles with their mental health in some way. But I never had seen anybody talk about that or acknowledge it as something that was okay to talk about. So I didn't think that that's something that I could ever admit to them. And so when the questioning came, it seemed almost accusatory, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just kind of snap out of it? And they didn't really have the knowledge to approach that in kind of a compassionate way. I think what would have been most helpful for me would have been for my mom or my dad to kind of sit back and really be raw and real about some of their own experiences so that I could see that, wow, these people are human too, and they go through these things, and maybe be able to feel that I'm more on that same level with them rather than, growing up seeing them as these unapproachable, perfect adult figures that, cannot relate to what I'm going through. To be able to hear that they had gone through similar things would have made me reach out more.
We have a question.
Yes, I was wondering if the person who has the mental illness, the child, if you approach them as a parent and ask the questions, of course they're going to say no, everything is fine. But does one recognize or know that they're in trouble so that you can continue asking the question, is everything okay? And they might say no because they don't want to, admit it, but are they fully aware that there is something going on that's wrong?
Karen?
In asking the question, I would first suggest to acknowledge what you're seeing in your child. So to acknowledge that, and I'm seeing that you're a little sadder. I see that you don't like to go out as often. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Or, to acknowledge those feelings that they are going through. And the other thing that I've come across, especially around grief and loss, but it certainly pertains to other difficult areas in our life, is saying the words. So using the language. Because people are afraid to say the word suicide because maybe that'll make them think about it. And research shows, and that does not happen. And so, Eric, maybe you could speak a little bit about that in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's really hard to
The
hear.
language.
It's really hard to hear, probably especially for this audience, but it is okay to ask a young person or a friend or someone that in your community. If you're close to that person, it's actually okay to ask them that direct question. So that's what professionals tell us, and the way I like to liken that, it sort of takes the air out of the balloon. It kind of acknowledges that that thing that we've been kind of holding back. Just to address your question a little bit more, I believe, I haven't really seen evidence, and I'm not a mental health professional, that the first time this comes upon you, you really have no idea what's going on. You just feel horrible. You just, and our young team was talking about today, you just can't get out of bed sometimes. You may be sleeping 12 hours a day, so you may recognize this as other behavior, but the young person may not know that they're depressed. I honestly think that may have been the situation with my son. So this is why we know 75% of the onset of mental illness is before the age of 24. So your kids are susceptible to this now. And just like a physical health challenge, if they get on top of it, they learn to manage it. So you've got Erin here, who's in her slightly over 25 years, and she's got a whole toolkit that she's using to actively manage her mental health. So you get to know when things are coming on. I don't per se struggle from a diagnosable mental health challenge, but I know when I'm pushing my limit. I know when that stress and anxiety is starting to creep up on me, And I try to manage that with sleep, with the right amount of exercise. Those sorts of things come over time. Your kids aren't going to know that right away, but you'll know some of that.
Related to this, I wonder if some of us parents are a little bit, it's difficult for us to decide when has it gone beyond, my control, where I feel perhaps I'm seeing some of those symptoms that you've mentioned. How does one to make the determination that maybe a professional needs to be consulted or something needs to go beyond the immediate family?
Mhm. In the last couple of weeks, in knowing that this panel was coming up, I actually approached the teens that I work with and asked them about this panel and what they would like their parents to know in that regard. And one 20-year-old boy that I was talking to today, he said that, he did not want to, he never ever wanted to go to counseling. But then when he was able to get there, he saw what it was about, because he was taught that there's something wrong with you if you go to talk to somebody. And so there's another piece of that conversation that we need to change up. That it's okay to talk to somebody else. And he was very glad he did it, and I asked him why, and he said that it acknowledged what he was going through, and that he wasn't, well, he used the words wasn't going crazy, but we had a conversation about that just a little while ago, and some people don't really like that word too much when talking about themselves. So, but that's what he said, that, and it's, I think, going to seek out other help, and it could be, Trinity talked about her grandfather, it could be another trusted adult. There's a variety of people, somebody in the religious community, spiritual community. There's a lot of different avenues to reach out. Was that a little bit of the
I'd like to hear from Trinity for a second,
Yeah.
just from the other perspective of being a young person who's often engaged in discussion, and as a confidant and as a real rock, I'd say, to many. What types of fears or issues do you hear from young people about the initiation of discussion with somebody, whether it's a parent or somebody else?
Right, yeah. So when I'm saying to a friend, maybe this is something you need to take further, maybe this is something that you should seek professional help with, I hear a lot of, I don't want to because I'm scared of my parents' reaction. They won't accept it. They won't understand it. They're going to think I'm crazy. All this stuff. So for me, I was really excited to come here today because I just think it's so important that all you guys are out here coming and actively learning about mental illness, because kids are often just so unsure of what their parents' reactions are going to be, and a lot of the times if they do try to reach out, sometimes it is a negative reaction. You hear a lot of, it's a phase, it's your hormones, don't worry, you'll get out of it. And I think if your child is coming to you and they're actively expressing their struggles, which unfortunately isn't always the case, but if they are, really try to listen and take their word for what they're saying. If brushing it off doesn't really solve anything, and just being open, sharing your own stories too is huge, because it's important for your child to know that, hey, my parents human too, they understand this, they're gonna listen to me, and just, I don't know, open and understanding is just so huge, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that isn't going to come at a casual Sunday dinner for the most part. That is going to come when they're feeling stressed, when they're having relationship issues, when something has happened at school, when something has come up on Facebook, that when they're feeling stressed is when, and you might see that in different behaviors, as in lashing out, or, you know, it's not going to be just, hey mom, I'm feeling really sad tonight, you know.
We have two questions up, one here and then one down.
Hi, you provided the perfect segue. In terms of reaching out, I wanted to just bring up social media, which, as we know, can be a positive and a negative, and I'm wondering the panel's thoughts on social media as it pertains to this issue, and our kids reaching out via various avenues, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, texting, and reaching out to other peers. It's difficult to discern, I think, where they're reaching out for positive help in that regard, or where sometimes that can perhaps be a detriment.
I'm going to be very brief and then kick it over to the young people using the social media. And by the way, I have a Snapchat account, so who has a Snapchat account here? Come on. Who knows what Snapchat is? You better start knowing what Snapchat is. I think it's a great question. The fact of the matter is it is here to stay, 100%, and there's several perspectives that I think we should talk about tonight. One is how can the parents communicate more effective ways to interface with that social media, screen time. You know, it amazes me when I can walk into my daughter's bedroom and she'll have like 9 windows open while she's studying, and somehow that can work for her. The flip side is it can be very distracting. It can be a place to retreat to, and you know. So, and then I think we should talk a little bit also about the blown out of proportion examples where certainly there is bullying. There are some tragic things that happen as a result of social media, and that exacerbates it. But those ones aren't the general rule, and I think they may even be outweighed by the positive opportunities to get support. You know, like we see our students connecting with one another and supporting each other through social media. So there's all these different angles.
Yes, I can make a quick comment about that. I'm not a huge social media person. I mean, in comparison to other young people, I grew up, I guess, on social media, so I'm on all the different platforms, but I'm not big with self-disclosure on social media. We brought up texting, which I think is a really big thing. Like, I have a much harder time calling up a friend and being like, feeling really off today, I'm not feeling great, but it's a lot easier to just, send them a text message to say how I'm feeling. So I think texting has a really positive role in my life specifically. I've seen both positive and negative uses of Facebook in particular. I really feel like it's a blessing and a curse. Blessing in the way that it is a way of refuge and could be a way to find social support groups, as well as lots of positive messages that come across. I think it's gotten a really negative light, and there's a lot of reason for it to have negative light as well, because it is a platform for cyberbullying, as well as I've seen a lot of young people make very, Facebook statuses asking for support, which kind of either backfire on them or seem too general in some ways. But I have to say, from my own experiences, the majority of the people that I know struggling do not use Facebook as a support method in terms of how public it is. Like, they won't make statuses concerning, this is the majority that I know. I do know specific people who have used it to say I'm reaching out for help, but in general, through my experiences, Facebook is more used as a distraction, or if you're specifically messaging individual people for support. I don't normally see a lot of people using it as, let's make a status saying that I'm in a crisis situation, and often when that crisis situation status has been made, I've very rarely seen positive reactions to that. So really, I just stand by saying it's a blessing and a curse, and there's many benefits, but it needs to be monitored in some way as well.
Yeah.
The benefits I've seen, and maybe this is from a unique perspective of knowing a lot of people who are open about mental health, but that it can certainly bring a sense of community with like-minded people who are open to talking about this, and also as a vehicle to spread more positive, inclusive, compassionate messages around mental health to kind of counter the stigmatizing messages that we've been used to growing up. In terms of the negative stuff I've seen from my own perspective, I think it's mainly that it can become a compulsive thing to keep checking social media and checking texts and being up all night, getting invested in this technology. And I personally found it very hard to turn that off, and that's been difficult for my sleep and for my anxiety. It can exacerbate that for sure. But it also has opened up more of a community of people that I can see are interested in and care about the same things, and that sometimes that is one way that young people might reach out, is by posting something or by sending someone a message where it's a little less intimate than picking up the phone or talking to someone face to face. So, but yeah, that's kind of the experience I've had.
Trinity?
Yeah. Just adding to what you had to say, there is a lot of positivity actually about social media. There are a lot of groups where kids can go anonymously and, you know, on social media platforms and just talk about their struggles in a positive, like, let's make this better light, and just helping kids to find other kids who are struggling, because like it's a lot easier to open up when there's not a face and a name to who's actually talking. So in a way, it can actually be very helpful. It can be the first step to a child wanting to get further help, because they know they aren't alone and it isn't as uncommon as they may think, and hearing from different perspectives of ways to cope, positive ways to cope, and just, yeah, because I guess loneliness is a huge thing when struggling with mental illness, so it really does help. There are some negative parts of social media surrounding mental illness too, where it gets romanticized and taken too far, where people are almost supporting the negativity. But I'd say now it's more positive, more about social justice and trying to make things better and trying to end the stigma, just like Jack.org is doing. So, yeah, social media does have a pretty negative connotation now, I think, but it's not as bad as maybe it may seem from the outside.
You've been waiting patiently.
Hi. What do you do when your child has come to you and has acknowledged that there's an issue and wants to do something about it, but isn't open to necessarily getting the treatment that needs to be happening, like seeing somebody and speaking to somebody? How do you open up her mind about that? How do you get her to go there and get the help she needs?
Matthew wants it, I can tell he's adjusting his mic.
One thing that I'll say is treatments don't have to be what we normally think as treatments. Like, we view mental health as a spectrum, and the line between illness and health is almost invisible and completely different for everybody. So certain treatments like medications or individual counseling are kind of the go-tos. But everybody needs to find the treatment that's right for them. They need to find it at the right time, in the right way. And it can often be it often takes a couple tries to find the right one as well. To find a counselor that you can be open with, or to find a medication that works right with your brain. It's really, I'll go back to the holistic approach to mental health. Treatments can be as simple as getting 8 hours of sleep and eating 3 meals a day. Even that can be a treatment. So if they're neglecting to seek out external treatment, then encourage them to find their own, and maybe they will.
Karen, I imagine as a practitioner, you get many calls from parents who talk about reluctant children, and I wonder if you could shed some light.
And my approach is, and I'm so glad to see this conversation happening, is a very holistic approach. So I would, just acknowledge once again the courage it takes to say that to me. That takes a lot of courage, and I'm so glad that you did that. So let's look at some ways that we can handle the experiences you're having. How is your sleeping habits? How have you found your eating lately? Do you feel stressed? Where do you feel stressed in your body? And looking at those different things that you can do. Maybe, why don't we go for a walk every evening after supper together? you know, do that small thing, or is how much water are you having on a daily basis? It's a really holistic approach, and just slowly. And then as you see some where they start to feel a little more engaged in themselves, or a little more confident, then you could approach the area. Do you think now it's kind of time that we go and talk to somebody and look at the different resources that you have that? Or do you think that you'd like to continue on this path and it's working for you? Let's try that and let's review it in a couple of weeks. Like sit down and do that. So just really slow baby steps, and just acknowledging those little baby steps that they take, just like ourselves, you know, that we need to do when we're stressed.
I think this is all good advice. One thing I'd suggest is all parents should be trying to get ahead of this thing and not waiting till the time that it's your child finally disclosing. You know, we should, probably most of your kids are getting ready for some sort of transition, and I'm sure somewhere there's a banner, John, where it says 98% of students at CDS go on to post-secondary, and all those things are coming up for your kids. You should all be getting prepared to understand this most exciting, exhilarating, and most frankly, most dangerous time your kids are about to pass through as they do this transition from secondary to post-secondary, and getting ahead of it, all of us as a group. And having conversations like this, just telling your daughter, for example, that you were here tonight and you learned a couple things. You learned about 3 students who've all been to counseling. Well, sorry, 2 students and a former student and 1 recent grad who've all, you know, been through counseling. I see a psychiatrist once a month. Just to be able to say those things, to just make it more common, because it is very, very, very common. And all these things together will help.
Eric, I wonder, are there some, or Karen as well, anyone on the panel really, you may very well know, some specific places parents can go to get some information, some understanding, some assistance?
Yeah, let me address that as best I can. First of all, Jack.org has a number of resources, but we are not a mental health services or organization. So if some of you have a son or daughter in crisis, we're not the place you should call. We're about activating this discussion and getting people aware. But we do keep resources on our site, so that's an easy place to find. The number one place I say that parents should go to in Canada to find sort of a youth perspective on a broad spectrum of mental health issues is Kids Help Phone. We've all heard of Kids Help Phone. What we don't know is it's much more than a help phone. It is a best-in-class website for mental health resources. Those are geared and written for young people to absorb, and it's young people up to age 20, okay? But there's tons of resources on there that if you read them as an adult, you're going to learn just as much, okay? So it's a great place to go and find out about everything from bullying to cyberbullying to eating disorders to depression to suicide. All those sorts of things are all there and addressed. But the other big ones to go to are places like CAMH, which has great resources for people, and that's a site that anybody can, you know, you've got to dig through it. There's a lot of pages to get there. And they'll talk about it from the parent perspective, they'll talk about it from the youth perspective. CMHA is another good site. But I always sort of point people to Kids Help Phone first because it's got a little more user-friendly information you can absorb. Karen, do you have anything else?
I think you covered it. Of course, your doctor is always a good resource, and asking your children what they have done for themselves, and you know, explore those other options as well. York Region Support Services has some really good ones. There's Catholic support services that are available to any religion. So they have some wonderful resources as well. The school here is phenomenal. Their support services here, the people that work here are phenomenal and will help you in looking to the specifics of what you need.
We have a few questions. I'd like to come back to transitions in a moment, but we've got a few questions.
Eric, you touched upon my question, and that is, what advice would you all give to parents and their teens when that shift happens? So they're leaving high school, going on to post-secondary, especially if they're in residence, you're not all under the same roof, you're not seeing them on a day-to-day basis, you can't look out for those signs, don't have the same kind of dialogue that, let's say, we would, be having. What advice would you give?
I'm going to try to be concise because I could go on for probably about an hour on this issue. But the first thing I would counsel parents, having done literally hundreds of workshops with young people, and I'm kind of contextualizing this for the parents of kids at fortunate schools like CDS. And I'll never forget when I was at one of your sister schools in town, and we're talking to a grade 12 class, and it turns out fully 80% of them had applied with their first and second choice at two particular schools that you can probably think who they are, and they had one as their first choice and one as their second choice. There must be a reason for that. It's coming from the expectations of society, maybe family, partly the school. So where I'm going with that is there's a good home for every kid at some post-secondary place. And it might not be at one of those two places for your particular kid, but if they think that's the only place where they'll make you proud, then I would just caution you about how you're kind of communicating, that. So I'm going to pick on Guelph as a school, for example, that isn't one of those one or two that I mentioned, but I know it's a phenomenal place that's got a very supporting, nurturing environment. So there's that sort of thing. The second part I would jump into is what can you do, even though you think your kid may be the healthiest kid on the planet, what can you do to make sure that your kid is connected to health and disabilities and understands what that's all about, why it's there, because so many kids will go through that transition and for the first time, like Jack, they will be put into a situation that's uncomfortable to them. They finished at the top of their class and they get to a campus and suddenly everybody seems like they're on fire. Everybody's having a great time and everybody's like joining this club and that club and you feel horrible, right? So making this a discussion that they can have and be ready for and getting them prepared for that. And then there's the check-in process after your kid has left. And I'm going to pass it along to somebody with a youth perspective on that. How do you want to be checked into by your parents when you've left and they can't talk to you and see you every day?
Britney, do you want to go first?
Yeah, like I said, I'm only in second year, so I literally went through this transition less than a year ago. First year, it wasn't brutal for me at all. Like, it really was a really big transition. And I was on residence. I was away from home for the first time, and I didn't have the best residence experience. Just by chance, ended up with a lot of people who I didn't necessarily get along with, so that was very, very difficult. A couple of things my mom could have done to help. My mom would check in way too often. So she wouldn't, and it was great to know she was there, but it got to the point where I felt like I almost couldn't tell her bad things were happening or I wasn't feeling great, because I didn't want to worry her because she was already so worried. So if your kids are going through that transition, I guess it's such a hard balance to maintain, but show them that you're there, but also give them the ability to be independent and find their own place. Like, I really needed to be able to find myself. As opposed to, all these things were happening and I was having this huge transition and I wasn't able to kind of reason through on my own because my mom was calling me all the time and trying to make sure I was okay, and I wasn't. It was just very confusing for me. Further than that, I also think it's really important to reinforce to your kids, if they do bring up that they're having some issues with the transition, which they most definitely will, even if they don't bring it up, because I don't know anyone who didn't have even a slight struggle with the transition, is that everyone struggles. Really reinforcing that to your kids. Social media makes this really hard, but during first year, everyone on Instagram was having the time of their life, and first year was the best year ever, and everyone had these awesome situations, and I'm sure it looked like I was too. We all came home for the summer, this past summer that I was home, and I literally met up with every single friend, and everyone was like, it was good, but this, and this, which I would have never guessed based on their social media, and honestly made it that much harder for me when I was going through negative parts of my first year, because I was like, oh, well, look, everyone else is having such an amazing time. So as a parent, letting your child know that you've listened to someone who's been there and they can honestly tell you that everyone struggles through the transition it really is a tough time, and there are tons of positives, but there are tons of negatives, and it's okay that there are negatives because that's all part of the journey of becoming independent and really having a really fulfilling university career.
One thing I'll add is I think it's very important to maintain face-to-face contact. No matter where they go, like I Skype my parents every Sunday, and that was how I maintain contact. And little texts throughout the week, like hope you're having a great day, or coming home from work thinking of you, like those were always really, really nice. And then, but the face-to-face, it's way more difficult to lie over Skype than it is to lie over the phone. I can fake a 20-minute phone call. I can't fake a 20-minute Skype call with my parents. You'll see it. You'll see it. So that is really important.
All great things. One of the things that I found helpful for students going away that we've worked on is just like you're packing their toolkit to go into their residence of their towels and soaps and shampoos, is do a toolkit for their mental health. So, making lists of, this is a transition for you, and in transition we naturally go through stress, and it's going to be difficult, and you have to put yourself out there to meet new people, and you are going to be in uncomfortable situations. But if you're feeling a little too uncomfortable, what are some of the things that you can do? And then in that toolkit list, a distress center number. You look up the services that the university provides to students around counseling, mental health. Some of them even have their own distress center numbers, so to write those down. And then who are your top 3 people to go to? And then find out what those are and write their cell phones down. Or you can put them in your notes on their iPad or whatever that may be, but having that toolkit, being proactive so that they have a place to go, and the Kids Help phone line is awesome.
Yeah, there's one that I neglected to mention as well. We're actually going to be entering into a partnership with this organization, and they have the #1 resource for youth in transition, and it's actually called Transitions, surprisingly. And it was written by a gentleman named Dr. Stan Kuchar, who runs a site called teenmentalhealth.org. And this is actually you can download it as an app. It's on my phone, which I loaned to this gentleman. Take our photo. It's you can download a PDF. What's really nice about Transitions, the resource, is it actually contextualizes mental health amongst all those other things you're going to have to transition. So it talks about finances and roommate issues and relationship issues and drugs and alcohol and so on, and mental health and depression and suicide. And it's a great resource for parents, and if we're trying to work towards getting them into frosh bags and things like that for young people, and it's a nice little booklet in electronic form.
And I'll just add, as a student who was going into first year already very much struggling with depression, and we knew that, and I had a diagnosis and was getting treatment, find the accessibility services or disability services at the school. So pretty much every school will have something like this where they provide accommodations for students with a mental health challenge. So this is like giving more time to write exams, or note-taking or extensions or other kinds of things, just to make that transition a little easier when you've already got a lot of challenges that you're struggling with. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that there's certainly resources like that if you know that your child is already struggling with something.
Good question.
I'd like to ask the panel to talk about what to do when the situation really gets critical, when the child expresses suicidality and has an active plan. I work as a family physician, and I'm actually a coroner as well. I see a lot of chaos in families when the child is actively suicidal. People aren't quite sure what to do, what the legalities are, where to go. Maybe you could talk about that.
Karen, maybe do you want
Yeah, certainly the first thing is the hospital, but often people are reluctant to do that, so is getting them somewhere where they can they need to have a safety plan at that point. And, but if I ever see somebody struggling, and that happens in our office, that we go with them to the hospital.
Aaron covered this today, so all the students heard about it. You need to stay with that person. So if you've asked that question that we discussed earlier, and you're so concerned about your friend or your son or daughter or nephew or whatever it might be, and you're in that position of the trusted adult position, or trusted friend position, you need to make that commitment to stay with that person. It's probably not something you can handle all on your own. They call this a secret that's too big to keep. So if someone who is suicidal insists that you keep this a secret, this is one secret you're allowed to not keep. But you need to stay with that person. I've had situations where, a student that has worked with us is struggling very severely and has confided that to another student, and we've had to call the parents. The parents didn't react properly. We've actually had to call the police. So one step beyond taking that young person, as Karen says, to the ER, and you might want to choose which one you try to go to so you can be a little more educated about what's in your area, because some have better youth-focused programs than others. But you need to be, prepared to stay with that person, and in the worst case, you need to be willing to call the police, or the police deal with this. They know it's not pleasant, but they know how to deal with it, and they take it into their hands and will get that person to a safe place. Then a whole other part starts about, is it a 3-day, is it 72 hour, what is it, and how do you plan for afterwards? But at least you've gotten that person to a safe place. And I like to think about it, what a horrible situation to be in, but isn't it better than not knowing that you can make some sort of a difference?
And
Sometimes the police don't want to take the person off, or they feel reluctant to do that. The person actually resists and says, I'm fine, I don't want to go anywhere, it's my right to not go anywhere. And so that's where I see a lot of challenges happen, is the person exercises the right to be left alone, and the police then will say, okay, well, there's nothing more we can do here, and then they leave that person. So just to let everybody know, there's other avenues. Seeing the family doctor put the person on a form and force basically that child to get admitted to an emergency department for at least 72 hours to get assessed. Without that, then there's a risk of losing that person.
I'm dealing with a family that has gone through an attempt recently, and the mother is quite in tune with mental health and knew the child was struggling, and resisted the common sense thing. I think the term is the form. I'm not particularly familiar with it, and resisted that, and only wishes she had done that. Obviously, fortunately, the child survived, and they're into the whole next phases. But there are steps that can be taken.
I'll add a couple things. If they're in crisis, it doesn't mean that the crisis started when the crisis started. It means that it started years or months or weeks ago. And when the crisis ends, the crisis is not over. It keeps going. And even if they make it through one crisis, if the issues are not actively dealt with, then more crises will happen. So follow-up is huge, and alternative treatments are huge. And encouraging children to completely be open to what they're feeling, and being open to their ability to deal with it. Being open to their capacity to be strong, and being open to their capacity to heal, and not be defined by a crisis or by a diagnosis. I don't think that anybody should have to live like that. So the follow-up has to be there.
Question up the top.
Yes, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about bullying in general terms, beyond cyberbullying, and what high schools could do to make further strides to make their communities more inclusive.
Trinity, I think you're a perfect person to respond to this.
All right.
As one of our leaders of our inclusivity group, I think you've got some insight.
Yeah, I mean, CDS has taken a lot of really awesome initiatives to try to stop bullying. It's a lot less straightforward than maybe what you think when you're young before you maybe have experienced it, like just straight up like, oh, you're blah 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 blah. Like it can be a lot more complex. So the Inclusivity Club is great. The Social Justice Club is great. Just talking to your kids about joining those things that they haven't already. Making sure that they know that they're not alone and that the people who are bullying them, it doesn't define their self-worth. That's a really huge thing because I guess when you're figuring yourself out, you are basing your self-worth off of what others are saying. It's really easy to do that, and making sure that children know you aren't defined by what other people say about you. You are your own person and you aren't all these negative things. Like, it's not true. It's more of just unfortunately a reflection on the person that's bullying you and what they've gone through and the negativity they've experienced. And
I'd like Matthew to talk a little bit about this too, because it came up in his presentation this afternoon.
Yeah, in my talk I share the 3 most important things that I learned through counseling therapy, and the second thing is take ownership over your own actions. I talk about how when I was growing up, a lot of the behavior of others that caused me such pain, I was in fact enabling, which took a long time to realize. And what Trinity said, I said it outright to them. The only person who's going to change how you feel is yourself. And the only person who has the right to define you is yourself. And that's a very difficult thing to accept if you've always based your opinion of yourself based off of how others view you. In terms of bullying itself, inclusive communities, a lot of it is language. We do a lot of work at McMaster around changing the language surrounding mental health to make it more inclusive, to make it more diverse. There's a lot of cultural stereotypes and things that get kind of mixed in with everything as well, and it gets very, very muddy very quickly. But the biggest thing is they're going to be bullies your entire life, and empowering those kids to take control of their own emotions, learning how to say, no, stop. You don't get to treat me like that. It's huge. It's empowering.
I think as well, as Karen mentioned earlier this evening, we do, when things reach a point within the school context, we do have excellent guidance counselors who are also there to help and to enable students to think about ways they can react to situations of bullying and to help them negotiate that terrain.
And one more thing quickly is that on the point again of you're the only person that has the right to define who you are and your own self-worth. Getting your child involved in things that allow them to express themselves and to discover who they are, whether that's maybe the arts or sports or things such as mission trips, leadership programs, all those things are going to really help them to gain that self-confidence themselves, to get better themselves, to stop listening to what others have to say about who they are and start defining it on their own, because that's really the most powerful thing. Someone can tell you you're amazing, you're beautiful 100 times, but it's not really going to get to your head until you can prove that to yourself. So the more your kids getting involved in, the easier it's going to become for them.
I was just wondering if somebody could elaborate a little bit about substance abuse and mental health. Do they go hand in hand? Self-medicating, I don't know. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure, I can start with that. I think it can come on for many different reasons. Sometimes it is, a recreational thing with friends, that it starts off as that and then it becomes a dependence. A lot of the time, though, it is a way of coping or escaping or numbing something that's already going on, and of putting you in a different headspace than the one you're in, where it's kind of getting unbearable. But however it starts, it takes a hold of you after a while and can exacerbate any kind of other symptoms that you're going through, whether it's anxiety or depression. So certainly it goes hand in hand. I'm not a professional, but from experience with learning about this and people I know, definitely a way of escaping from an unbearable situation in your head is something I've seen very often.
Yeah, addiction can definitely be huge as a coping mechanism, but on kind of like a day-to-day standpoint, the issues that are present will definitely go in hand with the effects of the drugs or of the alcohol. For example, alcohol is a depressant. I realized that I really alcohol is a very incompatible substance with me, because it lowers those inhibitions and it takes your mind to a place that is a lot harder to handle. All of the things that you can kind of make sense of through the day just kind of wash away as soon as the rationality goes out the door as well. So finding things that are compatible with your system that bring you up rather than bringing you down. Yeah.
Karen, I wonder if from your
Yeah.
experience with practice.
It's interesting what teens have taught me about that, because often they come in and they're very open about sharing their use of alcohol and drugs to help support themselves through difficult times. And so one of the questions I ask them is, what is the purpose of using that for? Is that the purpose to take away pain? Or is that the purpose of fitting in with your friends? And then looking at other options of how to do that. It's, there is a lot of media around that right now with the legalization of marijuana and what that looks like. So I think that's going to be a really interesting topic going forward in the mental health industry.
Do you find there are many challenges in getting alignment between the parents in dealing with their children's mental health?
You mean, by alignment, you mean on the same page in terms of the discussion and exploring the issues?
Yeah, one feels it's an issue, one does not.
Britney, I think Britney wants to address it.
I can comment to that I can relate to that quite a bit just because my mom and I were on very different pages when I was struggling. If I understand your question correctly, you're asking what happens when essentially you are on different pages about the severity of the mental illness. Is that what we're kind of going for, I'm assuming? Yeah?
Not different pages with the child, but the parents themselves on different.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I only have just my mom, one mom, so I can't speak to that. But
I certainly see that a lot in practice, and it's very difficult when parents, have different opinions. And in the end, it's the responsibility of the parents to come together, whether they are actively involved in their marriage, or they're divorced, or they're separated, because their children's health is the most important thing, period. And so, above all else, whatever conflicts you have and disagreements you have in learning about what a child is struggling with, and educating themselves, and how that they can work together in order to do this, and accepting different opinions on that.
I want to be provocative here. Could we have all the moms in the audience put their hand up? Every single one. And now all the dads. Okay, so it's probably typical. I'm seeing 3 times the number of women to men. It's that way in the mental health field generally. At our student summit, we have 70% students of the female persuasion that apply to the summit and get accepted to the summit. It's something we need to work on. But to your question about the misalignment, the generalization I would make is that the moms get it and the dads don't. And that may be because the dads aren't willing to get it. I'm not sure. It may be because of 3 generations of dads before them. I'm not sure. But we all need to get educated and get on the same page about it, because we both own that child, and we've got to care about it.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. Actually, I realized I do have something really big to say about that. I'm a child of divorce. My parents' divorce was very, very high conflict, and not the average divorce, but even the average divorce is very detrimental on children. But even when divorce doesn't happen, if there is misalignment between the parents, I just want to stress how hard that is for the kids. When parents don't realize that their disagreement about the treatment option for the child isn't, I found in my personal experience, when my parents were going through high conflict and were still in contact and had the ability to discuss the best treatment options for my sister and I, their disagreement made it that much harder for us to get the proper treatment we needed. It prolonged the process, and it made us feel really uncared for, because if they can't agree on something as important as their children, which should be a central thing for both of them, regardless of conflict otherwise, then your children feel very alone and lost in the world, because we really rely on you guys as parents. So I would just stress that if there's a misalignment, work your ass off to change it. I have no other way to say it but to be frank, because as a child of conflict, even if the conflict is slight, we notice it, and we need to be the center of your universe, because that's how we learn that we should be the center of our own universes. And I would just really beg that if there's any misalignment, ask your kids what they need and follow that. And if one parent has a gut intuition about something, that intuition is there for a reason. So even if the other parent disagrees, follow that one intuition, because there must be a reason for it. If there's any concern, better to be safe than sorry. Better to follow that concern than argue about it and have disagreements about what way we should move forward.
I'd just like to just add to those comments. Thanks so much, Britney. On separation and divorce, because it's very prevalent in our society, is that often the dealings with the grief and the loss associated with loss and divorce is not addressed with children. And there could be a variety of reasons for that. But what I see 10 years later is that those young adults coming back and exploring the meaning of that, and have had, that's been exacerbated into anxiety, depression, and it stems back from those losses that were not addressed earlier on in their life.
We are coming to an end of the time that we've designated. It's been a fast, I think, hour and a half, and for many of us, this is such a new topic. It's an essential topic, and I would like very much to thank our panelists for introducing us and increasing our understanding of how to introduce this mental health narrative into our lives, of how to be open with our children, of how to listen and be proactive, and how to work our asses off. I think they've done a wonderful job. I thank them very much. Panelists would like me to let you know that if you have a specific question that you would like to ask one of them or a few of them in confidence, or just milling around at the front, they're happy to stay around for a few moments. I would also very much like to thank our wonderful Student Services Department, Sue Scott and Krista Cuckoo, for putting together this very, very informative and helpful night. Thank you very much.